Thank you, Gina. So our speaker this morning is Colleen Russell. And let me read this to you. Colleen is a transformational creativity coach. She has a master's degree in transpersonal psychology, which is spiritually based psychology, and is trained and certified. Wow. And is trained and certified as a facilitator in self-esteem, neurolinguistics, grief counseling, dream coaching, soul collage, storytelling, and body-soul rhythms. I wonder if she has anything to say. She's a published author in the spring 2010 issue of Sage Woman magazine and a book entitled Overcomers, Inc., Stories of Strength, Hope, and Courage. Today, Colleen will present a talk entitled The Power of Love and the Awakening of the Divine Feminine. Please help me welcome Colleen.
Thank you. First I have to decide whether I want my coat or I don't want it.
Keep it handy.
Oh, yeah, I will keep it handy. A couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to spend 3 years with Marion Woodman, who's a Jungian analyst, whose work changed the face of Jungian psychology. And she brought to us through her books in the 80s and 90s the awakening of the feminine and how to really embrace the feminine and also heal the masculine within inside of us. So my talk this morning is going to be about the power of love and the awakening of the divine feminine. And I want to take us back to a month ago as we were looking at coming upon the end of the Mayan calendar. Remember that? After the holidays, I was in a store and it was pretty typical that everybody said, "Oh, I see you're still alive after the Mayan calendar." And we got to talking back and forth, and I said, yeah, I always thought it was the end of a cycle, not that we were going to have the end of the world, but many people did think it was going to be the end of the world. No matter where you lived in the world, there were fears around it. And it's so much like our culture to literalize and concretize a symbolic language or an indigenous culture's symbols. And what this clerk told me is that she said she was a Spanish teacher, and that what most people don't know is that the Mayan calendars are round, and they are about cyclical time. They are not the linear kind of time that we know. And so I did a little research of my own thinking about this. And what I discovered by some of the online research, and online research, you can take it or leave it, but that the Mayans and also the Hopi Indians really believed that this was the end of a cycle. But if we think of the cycles in nature, there's the end of winter and spring comes, or there's the end of spring and summer comes. So the ending of something brings something new. And what the astrologers have forecasted about this time is that it really is the awakening of the divine feminine. And so what we see, what's happening is that we're spiraling into a new age of what the Mayans might call the age of spirituality and creativity, which is more right-brained, feminine thought. And in the past, the awakening of the feminine has been available to humanity, but for whatever reason, we've not been able to actualize it within the world. And so I feel passionate about making sure that we don't fall back to sleep. As Rumi says, the door between the world are open and round. Don't go back to sleep. I personally see evidence in the world right now that the feminine is awakening. If you watch the election of the presidential campaign, Tom Brokaw said, "It is the age of women." And it's not that this is the awakening of the feminine is a gender thing, in that it's about women. It is about both men and women. It's about the archetypal energy awakening in both. But the fact remains is that women are coming into power and having a voice, and we carry more of that intuitive wisdom with us. And by nature, know what it's like to be connected to the earth and to our bodies, because we give birth through the body. The Dalai Lama has also been quoted as saying, "It is Western woman that will change the world." So what's happening to our civilization is that we have self-actualized enough now that we can look for the deeper meaning and purpose in our world. Another source that I've quoted often is that there's a book out called The Whole New Mind by Daniel Pink. And what his information is saying is that with self-automation and the information that's at our fingertips nowadays and all the technology being sent to India, is that in our work world, we're going to have to become creative people in order to stay alive and thrive. So he's saying that we want to bring both the left brain and the right brain together to make a whole brain. And so when I also talk about the awakening of the feminine, it isn't that we're going to go and become a matriarchal culture again, is that we want a healed, whole, and healthy masculine and feminine coming together and creating a new energy that will transcend what we presently have in our civilization. So this morning what I want to do is I want to share the story of Princess Milo Shan, which is the story of the goddess Kuan Yin. And this story came about in China at another time when the civilization had become too far to the one side, where the masculine had gotten so much power that the need for feminine energy to sort of soften the warring kind of energy was important. And then after I share this story, what I want to do is to look through some of the symbols and look at this transition from a mythological perspective. And then from that mythological perspective, take it down into very concrete steps about what you and I can do in our lives to bring this energy forth. Because I don't believe that this energy is going to bop us over the head and all of a sudden, whoa, we got this divine feminine. What it's going to take is you and I changing our lives and living from that place. So the story of Princess Milo Shan begins with a king and queen who already have 2 daughters. And more than anything else in the world, they would love to have a son who could inherit the kingdom. And when the queen becomes pregnant, she dreams that she swallows the moon. And when she gives birth to the princess, Milo Shan, the earth quakes and the world is filled with the smell of lotus flowers. And everyone in the kingdom knows that a divine child has been born. But the king and the queen, because they are so saddened that they do not have a son, cannot recognize the divinity of the new child. And Milo Shan is much different than her sisters. She likes to run around in the village in simple clothes, eat simple foods, so she doesn't indulge in all the rich foods from the castle. She likes to take care of the people that are out in the world. And she likes to eat simple foods and take care of her body. She likes to take in stray animals. And for most of her life, the king and the queen allow her to have this kind of lifestyle. But then she grows into maturity and becomes a woman. And the father says, Milo Shan, I want you to marry the man of my choice. I need someone who will inherit the kingdom, so I need you to marry a warring man. Well, Milo Shan, that is so not true to her nature, so she tells her father, that she will not marry a man unless she can marry a man who is a healer or a doctor. And the father is enraged. He is so enraged. And Milo Shan says that rather than marry anyone at all, that she would rather go live in the nunnery with the nuns and pray her life than to marry a warring man. And again, the father is so livid. But the queen intervenes on her behalf and says to the father that he should send her to the nunnery. So the father finally agrees to send her to the nunnery, but he tells the head nun to give her all the hard tasks. Make sure she gets the water from the well. Make sure she mops the floor, because he's hoping that she'll see the error of her ways and that she'll come back and marry as he said. But instead, Milo Shan enters the nunnery. And instead of wilting, and even though her hands blister and her back aches, she thrives in the nunnery. And news about her thriving at the nunnery comes back to her father. And the father becomes even more enraged. So enraged, in fact, that he sends some of his men to go set fire to the nunnery. And Milo Shan gets word that the men are coming, and she begins to pray to the divine, asking for divine intervention. And the nunnery is set on fire, but a big storm comes overhead, and the rains fall, and it puts out the fire at the nunnery, and none of the nuns are killed, and no one is harmed. As you can well imagine, now the father is livid. His daughter has done it again. And perhaps this comes with the time and age that they lived in. But he asks that his daughter be taken to the square and be beheaded. And so she's taken to the town square. And the men are there, and she is surrendering to her destiny, praying again for divine intervention, but surrendering. The man draws out his sword to behead her, and as he does, the sword melts in his hand like butter. But he is so convinced that he cannot fail the king that he pulls the sash from his tunic and he strangles Milo Shan. And at that moment, a tiger comes from out of the woods and picks up Milo Shan and takes her to the forest where the peach of immortality is laid into her mouth. And her spirit is taken into the heavens, and all the while Milo Shan is headed towards heaven, she looks back on humanity, and she hears the cries of humanity, and she prays for humanity. She prays so much for humanity and all the ills that are on the earth, that when she comes into heaven, the gods hear her praying for the earth, that they say, we need to give her a new name. We are going to recognize her as the goddess Kuan Yin, the goddess of compassion and mercy. Well, now down below on earth, her father has had a rash come all over his body, maybe from all that rage, I do not know. But he cannot sleep at night, and he can find no peace in the day. And so he calls all the healers around him and all the world that he can think to come and heal what ails him. But as everybody comes and tries whatever they have, it doesn't work until a priest that knew the Princess Milo Shan comes to him one day and says, if you can find someone who has unconditional love that will give you one of their eyes and one of their arms, you will be healed. And of course the king says, there's no one in the kingdom that would certainly do that. That would certainly have unconditional love and enough love that they would give me their eye or their arm. That's ridiculous. And he wants the man killed too. But he gets so desperate, as we all do at some point in time. He gets so desperate that he begins to pray, because the man has told him that he calls on Kuan Yin. He begins to pray to the goddess Kuan Yin. And goddess Kuan Yin in the heavens hears. She hears the prayers of her father. And she recognizes, she knows that it's her father that has betrayed her and taken her life. But she has so much unconditional love within her that she decides that she will come back to the earth and heal her father. So she appears in her father's room, coming back to the earth as the goddess Kuan Yin. But the mother recognizes her, the queen mother recognizes her as her daughter. And the father, he has not seen that this is his daughter yet, and he's crying in agony to please give me one of your arms and one of your eyes. And with that, the goddess Kuan Yin sacrifices an eye and an arm and collapses on the floor. And now both the mother and the father recognize that this goddess Kuan Yin is their daughter, Milo Shan. And from that time forward, the king and the queen come together, and they rule their kingdom and give food to all the people in the kingdom, the hungry, the poor, and the healthy animals, and all beings on earth, and they share all of their wealth. So any time that we have a birth in a story, it means that a new energy is being born. And in this particular story, it's the energy of the divine feminine. And if we look at the character traits of Princess Milo Shan, we see that she's able to stand in her power even when she is unacknowledged. And her nature is loving. It's inclusive. She's concerned about relationships. She's connected to her body. And she's not so concerned so much with the outer material world and all the things that it brings. Her life is more in the inner world, centered around prayer. Her concern is for humanity and her connection to the divine. And she stays true to herself, even when it means going against the beliefs of her father and her culture. And oftentimes, to stand in her own power in our lives, it also means that we have to stand apart from the culture. And we see in the story that she refuses to marry a warring man, saying only that she will marry if she can marry a doctor or a healer. A healer would be someone who's connected to the world of the feminine. He's connected to both the inner and the outer world. And he's also in service to humanity. Milo Shan accepts the consequences of staying true to herself, and she surrenders to her destiny, even when it means death. And we also got to look in stories that all of these characters represent us, that we also have that king who lives within us. And the king represents the ruling force of our psyches. And he is a king of the old order. And we see in the story that he resists the new energy that's coming into the psyche. And he reminds us that there's a part of all of us that would kill what is new and growing in the psyche. So we need to pay attention to him. We also notice that since everything is energy, that the energy of the feminine, the divine feminine, cannot be destroyed. In history, the temples were burned, women were executed, but even that cannot destroy the feminine, which is an archetypal energy. So we see in the story, too, that after the princess is killed, that the king becomes very ill. He can't sleep at night, nor can he find peace during the day. Symbolically, his inner and outer life are in conflict. Have you ever experienced those moments in your own life when your old beliefs are being challenged? And it can become downright miserable between here and here. And we can become more like the king, where we will not submit to something greater than ourselves until we have exhausted every option, or like I like to say, until your face is against the wall, will you surrender? And only then does the ego surrender to something greater than the self. In his misery, he calls out unknowingly to the divine feminine. He is desperate. He must find peace. And when the goddess Kuan Yin hears the cries of humanity, and particularly those of her father, she returns. And even though she knows it was her father that had executed her, she has so much unconditional love to give that she offers this part of herself. She forgives. And with her unconditional love and forgiveness, the king is healed. But she comes back now as the goddess Kuan Yin, which is a powerful archetypal force that has the power to heal. And by the end of the story, we see that when love is applied to a situation, that the ruling forces in the psyche, the king and the queen and the kingdom, are all restored to harmony and balance. Now, I don't know about all of you, but to me, this story brings me a lot of hope. It gives me a hope that it's possible with the energies of the divine feminine, the energies of love, compassion, mercy, and our connection to all, for us to move away from the love of power that is killing our planet and to begin with an understanding of the power of love. Our culture is ailing. We need the love of the divine feminine to create something new. So compassion isn't a sappy emotion. It means being able to bear witness to another person's pain while standing firmly in your own shoes. It's an energy that trusts that whatever a person is going through, that there is something of higher value waiting to come through. The Buddhists have a saying, accept everything and reject nothing. It is a belief that everything comes from God. So again, I say that this energy, we have to bring it forth. It begins in our own psyches, with our thoughts, when we face our own fears and our desires. The change begins with us as we learn to open our hearts to the abandoned, rejected, fearful parts of ourselves. For it is only then that we can learn how to truly open our hearts to another. It begins the next time you find yourself experiencing fear, the next time you find yourself criticizing yourself or others. These energies are not going to happen in a miracle moment. They will be cultivated by you and me, opening ourselves to all that we find undesirable. Then it will carry out to others and spread even to the most heartless. We will learn to see this type of acting out as a cry for love. Mother Teresa says, we cannot do great things on this earth. We can only do small things with great love. So let us go forth today and do small things with great love. And if there is to be peace on the earth, let it begin with me and you. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Well, now's the time you've all been waiting for.